Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. On the eve of the 7th anniversary of the 2005 London bombings, tonight we will be screening part 1 of a new updated version of the film 7/7 Ripple Effect. The film exposes the lies in the official government version of what happened during the 2005 London bombings. Please note, this film is entirely independently produced. The makers have no allegiance or influence from any outside party, and their objectives are simply to find out and report the truth. This cannot be said for all mainstream TV documentaries and news items about 7/7, which merely seek to prop up the lies and fabrication put out by officialdom since July 2005. Strap in tight for 7/7 Ripple Effect 2.
An updated and expanded message from Muad'Dib about the 7th of July 2005.
Dear viewers, I hope this finds you well, in good spirit and having a good day. Regarding the 7/7/2005 terrorist attacks in London, let us look at the facts and see what we were told and compare them. Then, using Occam's razor and common sense, let us see what conclusions are to be drawn, so we can all understand what most likely really did happen that day. First chapter, title: Mock Exercises and Bomb Hoaxes in the Run-Up to 7/7/2005. More than a year before the 7/7/2005 attacks, on the 16th of May 2004, an edition of the BBC One Panorama programme broadcasted a mock exercise, imagining what would happen if a terrorist attack was executed in London in the near future, consisting of 3 explosions on tube trains in the London Underground and 1 explosion on a road vehicle. The following excerpt from the BBC programme gives us a good idea of why this programme was made.
If there are now bombs going off above ground, in this case a lorry being attacked, it could happen anywhere. So the potential for mass panic across not just the capital but the whole country is very much with us. I think therefore we need to look at more serious measures. We do have reserve powers in effect to take over the BBC if we were to wish to, and to get them to broadcast whatever we wanted them to broadcast. Those powers are there in the Broadcasting Act. My advice to the Prime Minister would be not to use those, but I think we should be talking to the broadcasters about having the Prime Minister on the air very quickly.
You wouldn't disagree with that, Michael, at all?
No, I entirely agree that the Prime Minister should be out there, and we shouldn't be using the powers to bring in the BBC, but we should certainly be talking to the broadcasters about the way in which the coverage is going to be organised.
Please note well that he said the coverage is going to be organised. In other words, he was saying that they would write the script for and then edit and control the media coverage of an event in which there were 3 explosions on London tube trains and 1 on a road vehicle, if such an event were to take place in the near future. The question that begs to be asked is this: was that what they were actually in the process of planning, and precisely the reason for that programme?
This is the kind of terrorist attack the government repeatedly says is going to happen.
We've been absolutely clear, we can't guarantee that there will never be an attack. It's quite likely that they're planning one now.
I am wondering about the purpose and effect of this very programme.
This BBC Panorama programme appears to have been used by those behind the 7/7/2005 attack as the means by which the media's response to the attack in the near future was studied, so it could be controlled and directed towards their own ends. Mr. Price plays the bad cop and issues the threat of taking over control of the BBC, and then Mr. Portillo plays the good cop and says that there is no need to do that as long as the BBC behaves itself and broadcasts whatever they want them to. The good cop, bad cop scenario is just theatre, to deceive the viewer. The reality is that the BBC is a government propaganda machine and is already, and always has been, controlled and used by the government.
The headlines at 9 o'clock. In the past hour, there have been 3 major explosions on the London Underground. The first occurred at 8:10 on the Piccadilly line between Knightsbridge and Hyde Park Corner. The second at 8:16 on the Central line between Tottenham Court Road and Oxford Circus. And the third at 8:27 as a train was arriving at Vauxhall Station from Stockwell on the Victoria line. Emergency services have been called to all 3 scenes. There are no reports available yet on the number of casualties, and the police have said that it's too early to identify a possible cause. London Underground is now closed, and the police are asking people not to travel.
350,000 people alone are making their way towards the City of London at this point. And if the access overload system has been triggered and they can't get onto their mobile telephones, this will have profound implications for them, the next of kin.
We can now confirm that a tanker carrying chlorine has exploded at the junction of Shoreditch High Street and Commercial Street. Chlorine is extremely toxic in this form, and the police are issuing express warnings to people to stay indoors, close windows and remain there until the all clear is given.
In the days leading up to 7/7/2005, there were hoax bomb scares in Nottingham and Sheffield. There will be more about Sheffield and South Yorkshire Police, whose headquarters are in Sheffield, later in this video. Were these false alarm hoaxes meant not only to cause panic and confusion, but also to lull everyone into a false sense of security, and into thinking that the initial reports in London on 7/7/2005 would also be false alarm hoaxes, so people would ignore them until it was too late? Second chapter title: Peter Power, Dupe or Accomplice? Then, on 7/7/2005, we were told on TV by Peter Power of Visor Consultants that they, and the private company employing them, who helped choose the scenario for it, were running a mock terrorist drill in the London Underground, with practically the same scenario as what actually really happened on that day. In other words, the actual mock anti-terror drill that the BBC Panorama programme of May 2004 had outlined had been chosen by Visor's client to be carried out on the very same day that 4 Muslim suicide bombers also chose the same scenarios that Visor's client had chosen for the mock drill, causing real and devastating explosions on 3 London tube trains and 1 road vehicle. Please think about that unbelievable set of coincidences for a few seconds, to let the implications of it sink in. Then, please ask yourself, what are the odds against all of that happening by chance?
Just to get this right, you were actually working today on an exercise that envisioned virtually this scenario.
Almost precisely. I was up until 2 o'clock this morning because it's our job, my own company, Visor Consultants. We specialise in helping people to get their crisis management response. How do you jump from slow time thinking to quick time doing? And we chose a scenario with their assistance which is based on a terrorist attack because they're very close to a property occupied by Jewish businessmen. They're in the city, and there are more American banks in the city than there are in the whole of New York. A logical thing to do. And I've still got the...
I was going to say, how extraordinary today must feel for you as it unfolds.
In his TV video clip, Peter Power states that their customer helped to choose the exact scenario. I repeat, Visor's customer helped to choose the exact scenario. To this day, Peter Power refuses to publicly identify the customer who chose the exact scenario. Why?
Since then, he has claimed that it was for London-based information giant Reed Elsevier, which, interestingly, has links to the arms trade, the military-industrial complex, and Defence Systems and Equipment International. A subsidiary, Spearhead, organised defence shows, including an event where it was reported that cluster bombs and extremely powerful riot control equipment were offered for sale. Reed Elsevier's European head office is in Amsterdam, and so is the Israeli security company ICTS. I said Peter Power claimed that the company was Reed Elsevier because it doesn't make sense. Why would a publishing company want to run an exercise involving blowing up tube trains? How could that affect a publishing business? Why would a publishing company need to go from slow time thinking to quick time doing just because some tube trains had blown up? It smells fishy and unreal. I, for one, along with many others, do not believe or trust him. In the BBC Conspiracy Files 77, he backtracked and stated that it was entirely office-based, involving 6 people, whereas initially he said it was for a company involving 1,000 people.
And we sat everybody down in the city, 1,000 people involved in the whole organisation, but the crisis team...
We know from other sources that there was at least one lie drill being carried out that day, involving lots of people, including policemen. DCI Steve Williams of South Yorkshire Police, all the way from Sheffield, was there, in London, taking part in a training drill that day. It has also been observed that on Luton Station car park CCTV video footage, both on the day of the practice run, the 28th of June, and on 7/7, there was a dark-coloured Jaguar present in the Luton Station car park that appears to have been the car of their handler. Did the Jaguar's driver provide them with the backpacks? Who was driving that Jaguar?
Third chapter title: Foreign Security Firms. Can they be trusted? Verint Systems is the security firm that is responsible for the CCTV surveillance cameras in the London Underground rail network, and it is an Israeli company with approximately 1,000 employees. No CCTV footage of the 4 Muslims boarding the tube trains has been released by Verint, who claim that their cameras were not working. Why? Because the 4 Muslims were not on the tube trains that blew up. Fourth chapter title: The 4 Muslims, actors or patsies? We were also told that the training exercise involved 1,000 people and, of course, amongst those 1,000 people would have to be the 4 people who were recruited to play the parts of the mock terrorists. Therefore, as part of the exercise, they would have recruited 4 young Muslim men to carry 4 backpacks that were to contain mock explosive devices. Who were their Muslim recruits? These Muslim men would naturally buy return train tickets and not one-way tickets, because they would be going home after playing their parts in the training exercise. One of them, the oldest, who would be considered the ringleader of the group because of his age, would have been asked to make a suicide video prior to 7/7/2005, being told it would form part of the training mock terrorist exercise, in order to make the exercise, and possibly a film to be made of it, look as realistic as possible. He would obviously not have been told the details of the whole plan until later, probably when he and the others arrived at Luton on the 7th of July 2005, to make absolutely certain that the scenario of the drill which would take place that day could not be talked about by or to anyone. The second oldest would also be asked to make a similar video as a backup for just in case anything went wrong, and or the oldest pulled out of the drill before the 7th of July 2005.
Mohammed Siddiqui Khan's wife Hasina, now his widow, was pregnant and had started bleeding on the 5th of July, 2 days before the bombings took place. There was obviously something wrong with her, so Mohammed Siddiqui Khan took her to hospital in Dewsbury. She was examined and booked in for a scan on the 7th because of a threatened miscarriage. So, in the circumstances, as a loving husband and dad, as he demonstrated in his second video that has been broadcast, he most probably did pull out of the training exercise. After he had taken his wife home, he said he was going to see his friends, and she never saw him again. She miscarried on the 7th of July, the day of the bombings, not knowing what had become of her husband. The petrol attendant at Woodall Services on the M1 motorway, where Shahzad Tanweer stopped for fuel in the Nissan Micra, says he only saw 2 people in the car, Shahzad Tanweer and Hasib Hussain, as can be seen in the CCTV footage. So, it is quite possible that Mohammed Siddiqui Khan never made the trip to London, but was grabbed in Leeds and disposed of.